It's an awesome crowd this morning. We have a ton of people that are on the road today, or one way or the other, going or coming. They're on the road. Have a few that are at home sick, but it's the typical last Sunday of the year. But it's good to see each of you this morning. And I'm just curious, I mentioned it or alluded to it a while ago, how many of you are glad that Christmas is over? How was your Christmas? Have you had time to reflect and to think about? It was a blur. It's over. It's come again and it's gone again. How was yours? Was it all that you expected? Was it all that you hoped it would be? No. Some will say no. Some will say it was more than they expected. Some will say, well, what's Christmas? You know, we've talked a lot in the last month about some different aspects of Christmas. We talked about Joseph's story, a little bit of a different perspective on Christmas. And how, even though some of it was messy, it was still God's will. And Joseph was still faithful to do what God called him to do. Was still faithful to go. Well, I want to carry on with that just a little bit this morning and talk about the Sunday after Christmas. We're going to go back to the Christmas story. We're going to go back to the story in Matthew in a few minutes. But the story's still kind of messy. You know, I was in the store the other day, actually at the gas station, and I heard that statement from somebody next to me across from the aisle there. They said, "How was your Christmas?" And the story was really kind of sad. The answer was, "I'm so happy that Christmas is over. It's done." It tends to be a lot of people's answer. Really, think about it. The truth for a lot of people is that's just it. Christmas is over. Christmas 2019 is done. Never to be again. This year, a lot of people, here's the reality, a lot of people celebrated Christmas without Christ in it. They celebrated Christmas without understanding or even caring about the real reason for Christmas. Oh yeah, maybe they talked about the birth of Jesus. Maybe they told the Christmas story. Maybe they sang a Christmas carol or a Christmas song that had the idea in it, but it wasn't in their heart. It was, let's just get through this season. Let's just get it done. A couple of years ago, the story goes, there was a person complaining to a friend that she couldn't find any good Christmas cards at the store. I don't know about you, if you went to the store at all, that's all there was Christmas cards. For a month. Seems like it's overwhelmed with Christmas cards. I imagine that you get tired of the commercial Christmas at the store. And one lady said, she told her friend, she's like, I get tired of all these Christmas cards. They're all so boring. What's Jesus got to do with Christmas anyway? Why do all the cards talk about him? What's he got to do with it anyway? Well, the birth of Jesus, sadly, for a lot, that's it. It's just a story that we read about. And we get through the season. Kind of like the story of Santa Claus. Kind of like the story of the Grinch. It's just a story. I hope that wasn't your Christmas. I hope that your Christmas included Christ. I hope that your Christmas included some reflection, some time to think about, some time to savor his birth. I hope that you took the time to go to the wilderness. Remember talking about that. And to slow down and to open your eyes and your mind and your heart and to see where he's at and what he's actually doing in your life. I hope you took the opportunity to speak to family and to speak to friends about what the real reason for this season is, that it's Christ. For many people, though, Christmas is more about having an excuse for the excess, an excuse to go into debt, an excuse to spend more than they got. And truthfully, we're probably all a little guilty of that sometimes. Shops, though, they seem to like Christmas and Easter. Have you noticed that? They seem to be their two favorite holidays. It's only December the 29th, and I guarantee you go to Walmart, there's already Easter eggs on the shelf. You know how I know that? Because they were there yesterday. Isn't that crazy? We're not even finished with one, and we're already buying for the next one. I bet if you looked at the newspaper today, you would see already advertisements for the summer holidays. I don't know about you, but it felt like summer this week. It's crazy weather. I saw an advertisement yesterday during football games. Saw an advertisement that was talking about getting ready for, if you buy now, you'll be ready for Christmas 2020. That's a year away. But that's the ones that the media latches onto. Christmas comes and Christmas goes, and life kind of moves on quickly. How many of you are going back to work tomorrow? Yep. How many of you are going back to work Friday? Maybe in your home, Christmas even feels like it's just gone, left behind. We still have the leftovers here. Maybe the tree's still up. It's empty. There's nothing underneath it, but the tree's still up. Maybe you still have family visiting. Maybe some of them are even leaving this morning. Maybe some of them left yesterday. Maybe they're leaving tomorrow. Maybe you can't wait for them to leave. And family fun. Maybe you still have some turkey in the fridge. Maybe there's just a skeleton left. Maybe you're having sandwiches this afternoon with leftover turkey. Maybe you're tired of turkey. Funny I would mention turkey and family right back to back. Weird. But Christmas has come and it's gone. All the preparation, all the excitement, all the expense, and now it's over for another year. So how did your Christmas 2019 go? Was it all you expected it to be? Was it more? Was it less? Well, now that it's past, now that the excitement's over, we're ready to return to some kind of normal, whatever that looks like in your life. I wonder if that first Christmas, Mary and Joseph really knew what normal was. I wonder if they understood what getting back to normal life was. I was reminded very quickly, Thursday morning about 2 o'clock, what normal life looks like. And the excitement of Christmas, we were blessed to be able to get Brady a car this year. And at early Thursday morning, I was reminded that a raccoon will still win when you come head to head with one, even if it's a new car. I was reminded that life is normal, that life goes on, that insurance is still king. But I wonder what that first Christmas, that very first one, we've already talked about the messiness. We've already talked about the instability. We've already talked about the pain. We've talked about the confusion. We've talked about the hurt of that first Christmas. But I wonder if Mary and Joseph really knew what getting back to normal looked like. I wonder if they knew what normal was going to be like. I wonder if it really sunk in. We have the Son of God that we're raising. I wonder if their thoughts were, boy, blessed. We got God with us. What could possibly go wrong? Well, there's the biggest Christian fallacy that ever existed. I've got God. What could possibly go wrong? Life still goes on. I wonder what it thought like. I wonder what their thoughts were like. This long journey to Bethlehem, not for a nice little winter getaway, mind you, but this journey so that they could go pay their taxes of all things. That's what led to them giving birth to this child in Bethlehem. The journey wasn't easy. The journey was probably miserable, to be quite honest, on a donkey or on foot. You ever ridden a donkey 9 months pregnant? I haven't. I'm just going to throw that out there. But it can't be fun. This journey is probably worse than we can imagine, to be honest with you. The journey probably was just downright miserable. Then they arrive in Bethlehem on what seemed to be the busiest day of the year. You know why? Because there was no room for them anywhere. Must have been the busiest day. It was like parking in the mall on Monday morning. There was nowhere to park. It's the busiest day of the year. This was years before the invention of the telephone or internet. Joseph couldn't go to callahead.com and book a room. You know, Expedia didn't exist in Bethlehem back in those days. It was knock on the door and see if there was somewhere to stay. And we know the reality, there wasn't. There was no room in the inn. So they were stuck in this stable, stuck in this pretty nasty place. I guarantee you not as pretty as our nativity scenes. You ever been in a barn? Guess what? Animals stink. Animals make you stink. And guess who wins when animals and people come together? Animals. They were in a stable. They were in a barn. They were probably in a cave, actually, underneath a building. There's no midwife to help out. There's no air conditioning. There's no heat. There's no gas to start the furnace. It was just downright miserable. That's the first Christmas. The miserable first Christmas. How was your Christmas? How was Christmas 2019? The funny thing is, this is a Christmas that changed world history. This is a Christmas that changed everything. This was the single most important event in history up to that point. Everything changed on that night, but nobody realized it. You know how everything changed on that night? Because Emmanuel. What did that mean? God with us came and was with us and is still with us because of that night. Wow. I bet you there's people that can't even remember what their Christmas present was from 4 days ago, 5 days ago. We've already ate some of our Christmas presents. Those are long gone. Some of them are already broken. Some of them have already been taken back in exchange. Some of them already got refunds for and you bought something else. This Christmas gift still is with us. Think about that. Then the first ever unexpected Christmas guests arrive, and some shepherds. Does anybody have any unexpected Christmas guests? Other than a raccoon. Don't you love unexpected guests? Because the house is always so spotless. And the laundry is always put up. It's not spread out all over the living room. And you're just always welcoming those guests, right? I'm not talking about anybody specific, just in general. I wonder if Mary took the time to tidy up the stable a little bit because she was getting these guests to come. I doubt it. She's raising a baby. She's trying to figure out what this child thing is all about. But these unexpected guests show up in this form of shepherds. Now, their day had been far from normal too, you know. I mean, they're out doing their job, tending to the flock, and suddenly an angel appears and announces the birth of this child. Probably not a normal day for a shepherd. I can't imagine that every day angels appear out of the sky and talk to these miserable people. It just doesn't happen. And they sent the shepherds off to see for themselves, and we know the story. They go. And often we see these little nativity pictures where the wise men are there at the same time. Reality, the wise men probably weren't there to see Jesus till a couple of years later. But we get this story of the wise men showing up, the Magi. They came from the east, and they worship Jesus, and they bring him gifts. But then things take a turn for the worse. It's after Christmas now. It's the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Some of you don't even know who Paul Harvey is. We'll have to fix that later. The Gospel of Matthew records the difficulties that happened after that first Christmas. The normal life that Mary and Joseph had perhaps been hoping for, and no, it wasn't the way it was going to be. The Matthew, as we'll read here in a minute, records the tears and the sorrow to come after that first Christmas and the next few days. It's not the pretty part of Christmas that we read in those cards. It's not the pretty part of Christmas that we celebrate. It's not the pretty part of Christmas that we wrap up and put in all these colors and lights and twinkle all over the place and making pretty little nativity scenes. That's not the part of Christmas that we're talking about. Most churches, we spend weeks getting ready for the Christmas season, for the Advent season, and making the place look good and look pretty. We wrap our services in these nice little packages, and we present the gospel in a way that we hope people hear it because it's good news, and it is good news, but it's ugly as well. We don't talk about that part of it. We don't talk about the reality after Christmas very often. Speaking about what Mary and Joseph went through prior to his birth, we do in sermons. About what happened to Mary and Joseph after Christmas, though, is pretty rare. I don't know about you, but when you get good news, do you like the fact that bad news sometimes comes along with it? No. How many times have you said to somebody, you want the good news or the bad news first? That's a loaded question. Because the reality is the good news is really probably bad news. It's just not as bad as the bad news. You ever notice that when somebody says that? You want the good news or the bad news first? I shared a sermon about Joseph. Somebody even came up to me after church and said, I don't believe I've ever heard Joseph's story quite like that. We don't tell Joseph's story. We don't typically preach sermons like that because it's not the good news. It's not the good side of it. Part of the Christmas story, though, Joseph plays a pretty important role. I mean, he was the guy that stepped up to be Jesus' stepfather. He was the guy that could have left Mary, but instead did what was right for her. Pretty important role. But do you realize the Bible never even records anything that Joseph even said? Go read it. It's not there. His thoughts are there. His answers to God are there. But it's never recorded that Joseph said anything to anybody. Now, we know he did, but it's not talked about. Joseph is easily ignored in this story. We emphasize Jesus, obviously. We emphasize Mary. We emphasize the wise men and the shepherds and the angels, but we don't talk about Joseph. But after that first Christmas, life would never be the same for both Joseph and Mary. Never. Hopefully, after our Christmas encounter, life's not the same for us either. Dr. Luke, as you know him, the author of both Luke and Acts, he goes into great detail about often goes into great detail about important events in the life of Jesus and the early church that we're going to explore in the book of Acts. But yet, and listen to this is funny. In the Gospel of Luke, here's how he sums up the early years right after Jesus' birth. In verse 39 of chapter 2, 39 and 40, he says, when Joseph and Mary had done everything required by law, they returned to Galilee to their own town of Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. 12 years almost of history summed up in 2 verses. Wow. That doesn't tell us much about the after Christmas story, does it? Mary and Joseph did what they had to do, and the child grew. Thankfully, though, Matthew tells a little bit more of the story. Matthew tells us what the ugliness of that first Christmas really looked like afterwards. And in beginning in verse 13 of chapter 2 of Matthew, I want to read a little bit here, about 10 or so verses. I'll give you a minute to turn over there with me. Chapter 2. Listen to the after Christmas story. Here, starting in verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. These angels really like appearing to Joseph, don't they? Get up, he said. Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up. He took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I call my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. When what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled, a voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, get up and take your child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. For those who are trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up, he took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, he will be called a Nazarene. So after the wise men visited Mary and Joseph and gave them their gifts, when they did, they go off and Joseph has a dream. Another dream. Joseph's full of dreams. And in this dream, the angel appeared to Mary and told her that she would become pregnant, and God spoke to Joseph in a dream. And in this dream, an angel told Joseph to flee. Get out of here, dude, because there's some bad things happening. Flee to Egypt because Herod is going to try to kill your newborn child. Well, there's a Christmas miracle, isn't it? That would be like the store coming back to get your Christmas present. Well, we sold that to you on mistake, so we're going to take it from you. Wouldn't that be fun? Jesus, this greatest gift that's ever been given to mankind, is in your care, and you're being told that Herod is coming to kill him. Well, that's not really the part of the story that we like to hear about. We like the good stuff. But there's some things I want you to see about Joseph's obedience again. And it's just that. Joseph was obedient to God. It didn't matter what the result was. It didn't matter what the setup was. It didn't matter that Christmas had just happened. It didn't matter that all this good stuff had happened. Joseph is again obedient to God through the angel that's telling him, you need to leave. And Joseph didn't waste any time. He didn't get up in the morning and have to think about it. He didn't wait, in fact, until the morning. He got them packed that night and headed out of Egypt. When God said go, Joseph went. When God said move, he didn't have to ask how fast. He just moved. Boy, isn't that like us? Nope. What happens when God tells us to do something? Well, I don't know, God, let me pray about it. Well, there's a pretty good chance if he's answered you, you've already been praying about it, so you don't have to pray about answering his answer to what you've already been praying about. When God says move, move. When he says stop, stop. When he says go, go. Joseph didn't argue with God. He didn't ask God for plan B. He didn't tell him, I'm kind of comfortable here now. We've been through all this mess with having this baby, and now we got this thing figured out, and we don't really want to go. He didn't argue with God. He just went. He didn't wait to try to figure it all out. He just obeyed. Wow. That's a theme throughout. If you go back to the beginning, I mean, think about think about some of the big prophets. Think about Abraham. He just obeyed. Yeah, he tried to do things on his own, but he obeyed. Moses, he just obeyed. Jacob, he just obeyed. David, he tried to do it on his own too, but he just obeyed. Even Jesus, when the Father said, he just obeyed. Maybe there's something to that. When God says, we do. Another interesting thing to note here, God provided. He provided for Mary and for Joseph. When God calls, he provides. When he calls them to move, he provides in Egypt, and God provided financially for Joseph. He provided for Mary and Jesus with the gifts of gold from the wise men. Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him, actually. He was furious when he realized that these wise men had come to see him and had given Jesus gifts. He sent soldiers, in fact, to kill all the boys. Well, there's some retaliation. Mary and Joseph and Jesus left at just the right time. They left that night. The land that had been once enslaved to Jews, God now used to protect his people. Think about that. The land of Egypt, he's now using to protect them. Now, I don't know much about Herod, but you can probably deduce just from reading about him, he really wasn't a nice guy. He was a pretty vicious and pretty vile person. History has a lot to say about him, in fact. Caesar Augustus was quoted as saying that it would be better to be King Herod's pig than to be his son. Wow. It would be better to be his pig than it would be to be his son. That says a lot about this guy. Here's the thing. Pigs were protected by law. Sons were not. Herod's family wasn't protected. So our family wouldn't have been protected. Joseph and Mary's family certainly wasn't protected. King Herod had already killed 2 of his own sons. He had had them strangled. He'd also killed one of his 10 wives. I guess he just couldn't handle 10. He could only handle 9. The strange thing is, the one that he killed was his favorite wife. Sometimes it doesn't pay to be the favorite, does it? Because he thought that she'd been unfaithful to him, but guess what? She wasn't. It was his own selfish thoughts. Herod killed his 18-year-old brother-in-law because the Jews because the Jews liked him better than they liked Herod. You get in the picture, Herod really wasn't a nice guy. Herod was kind of a... You ever see the headlines or read the stories about... I probably shouldn't say this. About somebody that creates a heinous crime, murders someone, or does something just absolutely crazy, and in the comments, their brother or their sister, oh, but he's really a sweet person. I don't think that fits Herod here. He was a pretty evil guy. He'd killed his favorite wife's grandfather, in fact, and her 80-year-old uncle. The guy that had even once saved Herod's life, he killed him. He'd also killed his own uncle and his own mother-in-law. He was the sort of person that would, without hesitation, give the order to kill all of the babies, all the boys under 2 years old that might threaten him one day. That's the kind of guy that he was. But there's something else happening here. This is not about the evilness of the day. This is not about how ugly Herod was or how vile of a person he was. This is about God's plan. God's perfect plan, even in the middle of all this. Would you agree that God's plan is always perfect? We may not always see it that way because it's not our plan. We may not see it as perfect because something in life happened to cause us to get derailed a little bit. But I can promise you, God's plan is always perfect for you. This situation, God really didn't have a plan B. God's plan was for Joseph to get them out of there, to take care of them. Prophet Hosea wrote that God's son would be called out of Egypt, and that's what we see. After Herod's death, Joseph had another dream. And the angel spoke to him, and again, no questions, no arguing. Joseph just obeyed. And they returned to their homeland. They returned to Nazareth. God had protected them in his perfect plan. Isn't that something? Even in the ugliness of the story after the beautiful story of Christmas, God still is providing in his protection, in his provision, in his direction. So there's a couple of things, 3 things this morning actually, that I want you to take from this after Christmas story. First one is this. It may be hard to agree with this, but the first one is this. Some of us have found ourselves in places in life that we just don't like. We're not comfortable with. We don't want to be there. Some of those places may even be in places that surprise you. You want to know something? I don't like being a pastor sometimes. You know why? It's hard. Because you have to take care of people. You have to do things sometimes that put your family second place. You have to do things that are just and go places that you just don't want to do. But it's still what God has called me to do. So the first thing is this: the safest place to be is wherever it is that God leads you. It may not be the prettiest of places, and it may not be the most comfortable of places, but it's where God is leading you. Look at the examples. The wise men followed a star. They probably had no clue why they're following this star or where it's even leading them. It led them to the birth of this Christ child. It's the safest place for them to be. The wise men followed God's instructions after a dream, and they escaped Herod's wrath. Joseph followed the angel's instructions after a dream, and he escaped to Egypt. Joseph followed God's instructions in a dream, and he returned back to Nazareth. Things that probably didn't make a bit of sense, but it was the right place to be and the safest place to be because it's where God led them. What's that say about you and me? Maybe if you don't feel safe where you're at, it's not where God led you. What do you mean by safe, Pastor? I don't know. You have to decide that. Maybe if there's confusion in where you find yourself in life, it's not where God led you. Maybe if there's heartache where you find yourself in life, it's not where God has led you. The safest place to be is where God leads you. Here's the second thing that we see from this, and this is so true, but so misunderstood in our lives. A Christian, just because you were a Christian, you are not exempt from life. And that is where everyone said, amen. Just because you're a Christian, you're not exempt from the trouble of life. I mean, some of us in here have been Christians a long time, but you still have to deal with life, don't you? You still have to deal with the heartache that comes along with life. This Christmas story has difficulty and suffering in it, if you think about it. The wise men, they're avoiding the wrath of Herod. That's not fun. Mary and Joseph having to flee for their life. They've got the Christ child. They've got the Son of God with them. Why can't he protect them? Newsflash. They were put in place to protect him. They were put in place to raise him. You don't think that life's going to happen when you are put in place to raise something? Raise 4 teenagers. As one of them smiles real big. Multitudes of innocent babies are killed. I mean, if he puts the law in place to kill all these boys under 2, don't you think he followed through with it? There's the ugliness of life there. But God leads us through those problems and leads us through those situations, and he provides a way through just like he did for them. He gives us the strength when we need it, and he comforts us when we need it, and he's always with us even when you don't feel like it. The safest place to be is where he leads, and if you're there, he's with you. Even in the struggles of life, even in the misery that comes with life sometimes, we need to trust him to be with us as we follow the path that he has set out for us. There's the reality. Here's the third thing. God is still in control. Even after the ugliness of this Christmas story, God is still in control. We've all found ourselves in places that we just didn't have the answer. Would you agree with that? We've all found ourselves in places where we didn't know the way out. It seemed like we were back in the corner and all of the ways out were blocked. Even when you tried to fight your way out, you just got further and further and further into the corner. You ever been there? Even in the midst of those, God is still in control. I doubt very seriously that it was a pleasant thing to flee what was comfortable. And then I would have to imagine that once they fled to Egypt, they probably found themselves getting comfortable again. And then what happens? God says, hey, it's okay for you to return. Not only is it okay for you to return, I want you to return. But we're comfortable now. Listen, God's still in control. Even when he's calling you to move, he's still in control. Even when he's calling you to stay put, he is still in control. So here's what I want you to see, this after Christmas story. 'Twas the Sunday after Christmas. The Christmas story is not for us to just enjoy once every 365 days. It's not a season of the year. Emmanuel, God with us, is an every day of the year promise. Are you living that promise? Are you taking that promise to heart? Wherever he's got you, that is the best place for you to be. It may not make a bit of sense to you, but it's the best place for you to be. And guess what? If you don't feel safe there, if there's some confusion there, and you can't talk to him there, you're probably not where he has you or wants you to be. He's always in control. Quit trying to be in control. If we can take to heart the fact that he is always with us, you won't want to be in control. I don't know about you, but I have figured out time and time and time and time again, when I try to be in control, it probably fails miserably. You ever seen that to be true? Now don't say, yes, Pastor, I've seen when you're in control, it fails miserably. When you've tried to be in control in your life, it's failed miserably, right? God is still in control. He is the Christmas story every step of the way. Don't forget it just because it's gone. Don't look forward to Christmas 2020 just because you can save up and buy for it. Live the Christmas story. Allow the Christmas story to live in you every day of the year. That's my point. Yes, that's hard to do. Why? Because we still live in this world. Because we still have to deal with life. Because we still have to deal with people. Because we still have to deal with frustration. Because we still have to deal with stuff. And newsflash, just because you're a Christian doesn't mean the stuff of the past isn't going to haunt you sometimes. Because it will. But God's still in control. And if you're where he wants you, that is the absolute best place for you to be. So I challenge you this year. Don't look forward to what's next. Yes, I anticipate what's next, and I know you do too. But live today in him. Live today right where he has you today. Allow him to be in control today. You will be amazed where he takes you tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And then when life happens, don't blame him, but lean on him. That is a major failure of Christians today. God, how could you do this? How could you let this happen? He's still in control. Yeah, life happens, but he's still got you. Lean on him. Don't beat on him. Trust in him. Don't yell at him. If you're where he's got you, you're okay. I promise. His word says so. We see it in the story, the after Christmas story of Mary and Joseph. If you're not where he wants you, even this day, you can change direction. Even today, you can right the course. Turn the ship just a little bit to the left and you'll be back on course again. Just a little bit to the right and you'll be back on course again. But I promise you that iceberg in front of you ain't going to move. Follow his ways, not yours. God's in control. I want to leave you with a blessing. In fact, stand with me. I think I did this back at the beginning of the Christmas season. It's a benediction that you can find in the book of Numbers. I grew up with this benediction. But it's a promise to us. And it's a hope to do exactly what Mary and Joseph did, is to live in him. And it goes like this: may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you. In other words, may he smile upon you. And may he be gracious to you. May he show his favor to you because you're in the place that he wants you to be. And may he give you his peace. And all the church said, amen.